Imagine standing on the edge of the Taklamakan desert at sunset. The sand glows blood red, the wind howls like 1,000 ghosts, and for hundreds of kilometers there is nothing but death. This is the Sea of Death, a place that swallows armies whole. Yet, without this terrifying wasteland, there might never have been a thing called Chinese civilization as we know it. Today we are going to flip everything you thought you knew upside down. Deserts didn't just challenge China. They saved it, enriched it, shaped it, and maybe even invented it. And in the second half, we'll dive into the whispers, the rumors, and the wild what-ifs that historians argue about in the dark. Let's begin where every great story should, with fear. 2,000 years ago, a Han Dynasty general looked north and saw nothing but sand and sky. He wrote in his report, "Beyond the Jade Gate, there is no life, only the road to hell." That gate still stands at Dunhuang. Behind it lies the Gobi and the Taklamakan. Most people think these deserts were China's curse. They were wrong. They were China's greatest shield. Think about Mesopotamia. Flat rivers, rich soil, no mountains, no deserts. Result? Invaded every century by somebody new. Egypt? Same story. Open on every side except the Red Sea. India? The Indus and Ganges plains were a highway for conquerors. Now look at China. To the south, jungle and mountains. To the east, the Pacific Ocean. To the north and west, hundreds of kilometers of the worst desert on earth. Any nomad army that wanted to reach the Yellow River had to cross a waterless void where horses died in days. A full invasion force? Impossible for most of history. The Xiongnu tried. They failed again and again. The Turks tried. They mostly raided the edges. Even the Mongols, the greatest horse lords ever, took decades to figure out how to cross in strength, and by then China had already had 2,000 years of peace to grow strong. The desert was a moat wider than any castle wall. It bought China time no other ancient civilization ever had. But a shield is only half the story. The desert also became a golden highway. You couldn't march straight across the Taklamakan, so traders had to hug its edges. Two narrow corridors of oases appeared like beads on a string. One chain ran north of the desert, along the foot of the Tian Shan Mountains. The other ran south, through the Kunlun and the Altan Ranges. Between them, nothing but moving dunes taller than mountains. These oasis towns, Kashgar, Turfan, Khotan, Dunhuang, became the richest cities you've never heard of. A single caravan of silk could make a merchant richer than most kings. China wanted horses, big, fast Central Asian horses that could beat the nomads at their own game. The nomads wanted silk, soft, bright, impossible to make on the steppe. The desert forced them to meet in the middle and trade instead of fight. The result? The Silk Road was born. And the Silk Road paid for everything. It paid for the Great Wall, built with taxes on silk. It paid for the Grand Canal. It paid for the Tang Empire's golden age. One bolt of silk in Rome was worth its weight in gold. Guess who controlled the only place on earth where silkworms lived? China cashed in for 1,000 years. But the desert gave more than money. It gave new ideas. Buddhism walked into China on the Northern Silk Road in the 1st century CE. Monks hiding scrolls in camel saddles brought enlightenment across the sand. The caves at Dunhuang are stuffed with the most beautiful Buddhist art on the planet, painted by merchants who prayed they would survive the next dune. The desert gave new foods. Grapes, pomegranates, walnuts, garlic, alfalfa for horses all came from the other side of the sand. Without the desert forcing contact, Chinese food stays boring rice and millet forever. The desert gave technology. The Sogdians, Iranian merchants who dominated the route, taught the Chinese better metalworking, glassmaking, and silver coins. The desert even gave better water control. In the Taklamakan oases, people dug Kara's underground canals dozens of kilometers long to bring glacier water without losing a drop to the sun. Chinese engineers saw this, took notes, and later built the biggest irrigation systems in the ancient world. When the Yellow River flooded, they already knew how to move water like gods. Because they had practiced in hell first. the desert gave strategic depth. When the Central Plains fell into chaos, 3 kingdoms, 5 dynasties, Song collapsing, there was always a backdoor. Refugees, emperors, and armies fled west into Gansu and the Hushi corridor. From there they regrouped, came back, and reunited China again and again. No other civilization had that luxury. When Rome fell, it stayed fallen. When China cracked, the desert gave it a second wind. And in the end, the desert gave territory. Han, Tang, and Shang all pushed out and swallowed the oasis belt. Today's Xinjiang is bigger than France, Germany, and Spain combined. Most of it is desert, but controlling the edges meant controlling Central Asia's front door. China turned its curse into an empire-sized buffer zone. So far, everything sounds like the desert was China's secret superpower. But now let's dim the lights. Let's talk rumors. Let's talk about the things scholars whisper when no one is recording. Some say the desert didn't protect China at all. Some say it only delayed the inevitable. After all, when the Mongols finally did master the desert routes, Beijing fell in weeks. The Yuan dynasty ruled China for a century. The Manchus came the same way and founded the Qing. So was the desert really a shield, or just a speed bump? Maybe the desert kept China weak in the exact way that mattered. Every ancient civilization that survived learned to fight on horseback early. Egypt never did. It died. Rome learned late. It died. China? The desert made cavalry almost impossible to raise inside the walls. The Han dynasty nearly collapsed because it had no horses. They had to beg the nomads for them, paying insane prices. Some historians argue that without the desert wall, China would have been forced to master cavalry 1,000 years earlier and would never have been so helpless against the steppe. Maybe the desert didn't save China. Maybe it kept China agricultural, bureaucratic, and infantry-based until it was almost too late. There's another dark rumor. Some say the Silk Road enriched only the top. The oasis towns got fat, the emperors got rich, but the peasants along the route? They were taxed into the ground to guard the frontier. Entire cities were forced to supply caravans with food and water for free. When a caravan master died in the sand, the local garrison had to send soldiers to die looking for the body, just to keep trade flowing. Was the Silk Road really a blessing, or state-sponsored slavery dressed in silk? And then there's the wildest rumor of all. What if the deserts are shrinking the wrong way? Chinese engineers are now pumping glacier water into the Darien Basin to grow cotton. The Taklamakan is actually getting smaller in some places. Satellite photos show green patches where only sand existed 20 years ago. Some old generals supposedly joke in private, "We are destroying our best defense." If the desert ever turns into farmland, will the old moat disappear? Will Central Asian armies one day roll tanks across cotton fields instead of dunes? Or is that just paranoid nostalgia for a desert that killed millions? Another whisper, maybe the desert created Chinese xenophobia. Because contact with the outside world only happened in thin, dangerous corridors, every foreigner was seen as a merchant or a threat. Never a neighbor. The Sogdians, the Tocharians, the Uyghurs, all eventually swallowed or pushed out. Some scholars say the desert taught China to trade with one hand and close the gate with the other. A habit that never really went away. There's even a crazy theory that the desert invented the idea of China itself. Without a natural wall to hide behind, the Yellow River kingdoms might have stayed small and separate forever, like Europe. The desert forced them to think of everything inside the wall as us and everything outside as barbarian. So did the desert create unity, or did it create the prison of a single identity? And the eeriest rumor of all. Travelers still vanish in the Taklamakan. Locals say the sand remembers. They say the desert keeps the bones of every army that ever tried to cross it. And sometimes, when the wind is right, you can hear the ghosts of Xiongnu horsemen laughing at the idea that sand ever protected anyone. Maybe the desert didn't help China. Maybe it just waited. Maybe it is still waiting. So here we are. A wasteland that acted as moat, bank, university, and crucible all at once. A graveyard that paid for palaces. A wall that sometimes crumbled exactly when it shouldn't have. The truth is probably in the middle, lost under the dunes. What we do know is this: no other civilization had a neighbor like the Taklamakan. It killed millions. It saved billions. It starved cities and built empires. It closed China in and opened China up, often on the same day. Next time you eat a grape, thank the desert. Next time you see a Buddhist temple in China, thank the desert. And next time someone says deserts are just empty, useless sand, tell them the story of the sea that had no water, yet carried the weight of the oldest civilization on Earth. Maybe it was China's greatest ally. Maybe it was its slowest enemy. Or maybe, just maybe, it was both. And that is the most Chinese answer of all.